Hello and welcome to this poster design tutorial. In this video, we are going to be looking at a rather uncommon grid system. If you want to create a really dynamic and fresh typographic poster design in Illustrator based on one of the most dynamic grid systems, then this is the video for you. So here I am in Illustrator, and these are some posters I created earlier. Now this is a grid system where a distinct axis line runs along or through a composition. This axis line can be horizontal, vertical or diagonal in different directions and will typically divide a composition into two distinct zones, where text and images can then be placed or aligned on either side of the axis line. Now this can generate a lot of movement in a composition and create a lot of impact. In this video, we will be looking at creating a poster for a sneaker company looking to promote its product line, where we will be using photography, typography, and graphic images as part of the poster design. In this video, I'll demonstrate how to use the tools of Illustrator to create this poster design specifically, and later we will look at how to make some variations. So to create this poster in Illustrator, we are going to cover the following key steps. Step 1, project folder setup. Step 2, document setup. Step 3, grid setup. Step 4, working with image. Step 5, working with type. Step 6, working with color. Step 7, refine composition. Step 8, create layout variations. And step 9, exporting. This is a methodical process that will ensure we create quality poster designs and not leave anything unchecked. So be sure to check the bookmarks in this video so you can jump back or ahead at any time. After this video, you will be able to create a dynamic poster like this in Adobe Illustrator. Super easy. So let's get into it. So here I am in Illustrator, and these are some dynamic posters I created earlier using the techniques I'm about to demonstrate. If you want to take a look at these, you can find them in the class project folder. These are located in folder 2, poster templates. If you open the Illustrator folder, you should be able to see the file called Neopulse. So in the Illustrator document, what I have done here is develop a poster design from one of my sketches, which I have here, and I have also looked at how this could work in a variety of different versions. Now if I come up to View and click off Trim View and press Command plus colon on Mac or Control plus colon on PC, I can toggle on and off the guides, where you can see the grid system that I have used to structure this poster design. So as stated earlier, an axial grid will typically use one prominent line that runs through the center of a composition. Here we can see how this works on each poster. We have an axial line running through the center of each composition, and running perpendicular across the axial line, I have some other lines which will serve to help align text and other elements to the main axial line. So your 11th task for this class is to follow along with my poster design method. The purpose of this task is for those of you who may be unfamiliar with Illustrator. This is a chance to learn crucial techniques and get comfortable working in Adobe Illustrator. Now this stage is optional. You can either watch and participate or follow along and develop your own poster design. However, I will be encouraging you to do this later. So let's now jump into Illustrator and look at how we can develop a poster like this. And we are going to start with step 1, project folder setup. Now a quick step I like to take before I begin any project is to first set up a project folder. This is going to set me up to be super organized and have a place to keep all my assets and know where everything is. When working in Illustrator, it helps to be organized to improve your workflow. So I can either set this up from scratch or I can duplicate a folder I created earlier. So if you've not already done this in the class, go into the class download folder, into the design process folder. The last folder called project folder will have some additional folders inside. These folders are going to help us organize our project. So to begin, I would recommend you copy this folder, paste it somewhere you will access throughout this part of the class. For now, I'm going to save my files into a folder I created earlier in the class. Once you have your project folder set up, let's start artworking our poster. Step 2, document setup. So in Illustrator, to begin, I'm going to set up a new document. I'll come up to File, New, and select Document. Now on this occasion, I'm going to use a standard print size document. So on the top tab, I'll click Print, I'll click View All Presets, I'll select A3. Over on the right, I'll make sure my orientation is set to portrait. I'll set the units to millimeters. I'll set my bleed to 3 millimeters, and I'll do this because some printers like a 3 millimeter bleed when sending off to print, so I'll do this at the start. I'll set my color to RGB, make sure my raster is set to 300, and click create. And up will pop my new document. Now you may be wondering why I set this to RGB. Well, I like to start with RGB because if I decide to use this artwork for a digital composition later on, perhaps for a social media post, it's not easy to change the colors from CMYK to RGB. However, it is easy to convert the colors into CMYK from RGB. So to avoid extra work in the future, I like to start with RGB. So here we have our new document set up, and you can see around the outside we have the bleed line. Now for those of you that don't know what that is, it's where you extend your artwork off the canvas area. So when a printer cuts the artwork, they trim a little bit off so you don't get white edges. Again, if I press Command plus colon on Mac or Control plus colon on PC, I can toggle on and off the guides to toggle on and off the bleed line. Now, if you're following along, make sure you can also see your control panel at the top of your UI. If not, come up to Window and make sure there is a tick next to Control. Now, you're also going to need to have your swatches, layers, and links panel visible. Come up to Window and click these to activate and have them to hand. In this instance, I have a lot of panels down here on the side. So that's our document set up, and before we continue, I like to save it. So I'll come up to File, Save As, and navigate to the project folder we set up earlier in the class. Into the second folder, Concept and Design, into the Design folder, and save it in the Illustrator folder as Neopulse. Okay, so before we start adding any visual elements, I want to set up a grid. Now looking back at one of my original sketches, for one of my ideas, I explored using an axial grid system, setting the product image front and center, angled in line with the diagonal axial line across the page, with type set perpendicular to the axial line. Now this was a really rough sketch initially, but when I looked at this poster design a little closer in my Scamp draft, I was able to outline my visual elements to get a better idea of how I would like to compose my poster design. I like the idea of cutting the type across the axial line. Here you can see the guides which I have used to align my type elements. Step 3, grid setup. So for this poster design, the grid is going to be a little unorthodox. Setting up a diagonal grid like this in Illustrator is a little different from setting a column grid or a modular grid. Here is a good tip on how to set up an axial grid in Illustrator. So the first thing you want to do is start with the main axial line. To do this, you can come over to the line tool, then click and drag across your canvas area to create the line how you want it. For my poster design here, I have a particular angle in mind. So with the line tool active, I'll click once into the canvas area and up will pop the line tool option. For the length, I'll type in 500. For the angle, I'll type in 225 degrees. I'll click on Fill Line and click OK. Upon click, my stroke line will appear and I can just click and drag it into the canvas area with the selection tool. Okay, so this is my main axial line. Now, if we look at my sketch, you can see I have these other lines perpendicular to my main axial line, which I want to use to align my type elements. So to create these lines is easy. With my main axial grid line selected, I'll press Command plus C on Mac or Control plus C on PC to copy. Then I'll press Command plus Shift plus V on Mac or Control plus Shift plus V on PC to paste in place. Then come up to Object, click Transform and select Reflect. Upon click, a menu will appear. I'll click on Vertical and click OK. Upon click, that will reflect my line. So right now, that line is a bit long, so I'm just going to shorten it. So with my selection tool, I press and hold Alt and Shift. I'll place my cursor over the end of one of the points, and I'll click and drag in, and both ends will move towards the middle like so. And I'll just click and drag and move it until I get something like this. So now I'm going to look to duplicate these lines across my axial line. So I'll press and hold Shift, then click and drag my line along my axial line to the top like so. This time I'll press and hold Alt plus Shift, then click the line and drag it down like so, putting a little space between the previous line. Upon release, this will duplicate a new line. Next, I'll press Command plus D on Mac or Control plus D on PC, and this will duplicate the action, duplicating the line again. I'll press Command D on Mac or Control D again, and a few more times until I have a number of lines along my axial line, like so. So by duplicating my axial line, reflecting it, shortening it and duplicating it along the axial line, I've been able to create this diagonal grid system. Now this is where the magic happens. So with the selection tool, I'll click and drag over all my new strokes. I'll come up to View, scroll down to Guides, come across and select Make Guides. Upon click, this will now transform the stroke lines into guides, which we can now use for our poster design. To finish, I'll come over to the Layers panel, double click on the layer and name this Grid. And now I have an axial grid system I can begin to develop my poster design with. And if I press either Command plus colon on Mac or Control plus colon on PC, we can toggle on and off the guides. Perfect. So with my guides and bleed set up, I can now begin to compose my visual elements on the page. So for this particular design, there are a lot of type elements, some of which will be placed on a background image. So to begin, I'm going to start with the image elements of the poster, and when these are in place, I can bring in the type. Step 4, working with image. So looking back at my sketch, we can see that for this poster, I want to include an image of a product in the middle at the same angle as the axial line. This image will become the attention grabber, the primary hook for the poster design. Also, my intention for this design is to split the poster in two across the axial line. To do this, I'm going to place a background image to fill the right-hand side space. So let's see how we can get this background image into our poster. To start, I'm going to come over to the Layers panel and hit the plus icon at the bottom of the Layers panel to create a new layer, and I'm going to call this Base. With the layer selected, I'm going to click and drag it underneath the grid layer. And then I'm going to hit the lock icon on the grid layer above as to not accidentally select and change anything on that grid layer. With the base layer selected, I'll come over to the Tools menu and grab the Pen tool. I'll make sure that my foreground color is set to black and the stroke color is set to transparent. I'll come over to the top right hand side of my axial line guide. I'll click once just outside the canvas area and then come down to the bottom left of the axial line and click once again. I'll hold Shift and click down just underneath the canvas area to draw a straight line down. Then I'll click over to the right and then up to join to complete the shape. Easy. So this is the shape that I want the background image to fill. Now I'm going to bring in my image to fill the space. So I'll jump into the poster contents doc, and I can do this by coming into the class download folder, into the Bolts Media Kit folder and double clicking on the Content Deck shortcut to open in a browser. On page 5, we can see all the gel tech textures that have been provided as part of the guidelines for these posters. For this initial poster design, I'm going to look to use the Gel Redux texture. So back in Illustrator, I'll press Command plus Shift plus P on Mac or Control plus Shift plus P on PC to place an image. I'll navigate to the Media Kit folder provided in the Download folder, into the Graphic Textures folder, and I'll select gelredux.png and place. And I'll just click and drag over my shape area, releasing, and that will place in my texture. So upon placing my texture, I have now placed this on top of my black vector shape. So I'll right click on my new image, come down to Arrange and click Center Back. So now I'm going to use the vector shape as a mask for my background texture. But before that, I need to change the color of the vector shape. Currently, this is set to black, but I will need this set to white in order to effectively mask the image below. So I'll select my black vector shape, make sure the foreground color is selected, come up to swatches and set this to white. To apply the mask, we are going to need the transparency panel visible. If you cannot see your transparency panel, come up to Window, scroll down and click on Transparency. Next, I'm going to use the selection tool to select both the background texture and the shape vector. With them both selected, I'll come over into the transparency panel and click Make Mask. Upon click, the white vector shape will now be applied to the mask. And if we look carefully in the transparency panel, we can now see two thumbnails. To the left, the graphic image, and to the right, the mask. Now, if we look carefully between the two thumbnails, there is a lock icon. If I click this once to release, with the image thumb selected in the transparency panel, I can press up and down on the keyboard or click and drag with the selection tool, and we can move the background texture around within the mask. Also, I can click on the handles of the bounding box image inside the mask and scale up and down. So if you want to change the position or scale of an image inside a mask, you just need to make sure that the lock icon is unchecked in the transparency panel and the image thumb is selected. But remember, once you're done, be sure to click back on the lock icon in order to control the position of the masked image on your canvas area. Should you wish to edit the placement or shape of the mask itself, this time in the transparency panel, click on the mask thumbnail to the right, and this will enable you to click and drag to move the mask around. Also, you can use the direct selection tool to select anchor points on the vector shape, which you can click and drag to move around. Or you can also grab the pen tool to add additional anchor points to the shape, and again click and drag those around to edit the shape of the mask. So I'll just press Command plus Z on Mac or Control plus Z on PC to undo that. Click on the image thumbnail in the transparency panel and click off to deselect my image. And that's the background image now placed into our poster design. And if we come up to the links panel, we can now see the image link present in our document. If you can't see your links panel, come up to Window and click Links. Easy. So that's the first image in my poster. Next, let's look at how we can bring in the product image. So back in the poster contents doc, on page 4, we can see all the products. For this poster design, we are going to be promoting the purple sneaker called Neopulse. So first, let's jump into the class download folder, into the Bolts Media Kit folder. This is the folder that the client has supplied, which includes everything we need to design the posters. So I'll come into the project photography folder and start by opening the Neopulse image in Photoshop. This is the product image that has been supplied to us. And right now, as it stands, this image is not going to work because for my design, I want to have this image cut out. So for this poster design, I'm going to have to cut this sneaker image out first. Thankfully, this is a very clear image here, so it should be very straightforward to cut it out. So I'll just zoom in here to get a better view. What I can do here is come over to the rectangle marquee tool. I'll draw a selection around it and come up to the control panel and click Select and Mask. With the quick selection tool selected, up in the control panel, again I'll click Select Subject, and Photoshop will do its best to select the sneaker. Now if I zoom in here, I can see that it's not perfect. Some of the bottom of the shoe has not been selected. Now there is another thing you can do here. Over on the Tools menu is a button called Object Selection Tool. If I click this and move my mouse over the sneaker, Photoshop will see what I'm trying to select as an object. If I click this once, I will see all the imperfect bits have magically been brought back, and this is looking a bit better. Once I'm happy with it, I can click OK in the bottom right corner, and a selection will be made around the sneaker. With this new selection, I can come over to the Layers panel, and at the bottom I can click the Add Layer Mask button. Upon click, I have now added a layer mask and cut out the sneaker. Perfect. Now I don't want the image to be this large. I don't need the space around the sneaker. So I'll come into my Layers panel, press and hold Command on Mac or Control on PC and click on the layer mask. Upon click, a selection around the sneaker will be made. And if I now press C on the keyboard to crop, a crop box will appear around the sneaker. At the top in the control panel, I make sure Delete Cropped Pixels is unchecked and press Enter twice. And I'll crop the image. Perfect. So I'll press Command plus Shift plus S on Mac or Control plus Shift plus S on PC to save. I'll navigate to the project folder I set up earlier and save this into the Assets folder as neopulse.psd. So now I have the sneaker image nice and prepared, I can now bring it into Illustrator. So back into Illustrator, before I bring in my new images, I'm going to do some housekeeping. So over in the Layers panel, I'll come and click the plus icon on the bottom right. This will add a new layer and I'll call this Images. Now something you can keep in mind here with the Layers panel, if I click on the top right menu and come down to Panel Options, we can change the size of the thumbs. For example, we can click on small, medium or large, but we also have an option to add a custom size. If I type 70 pixels into Other and click OK, my thumbnails will now be a lot bigger so I can get a better visual glance at what is on each layer. So now I'll click the lock icon on the base layer so as to not accidentally select anything while I deal with the image I'm about to bring in. So with the image layer selected, I'll press Command plus Shift plus P on Mac or Control plus Shift plus P on PC to place an image. So here I'll navigate to the project folder, into the Concept and Design folder, into the Design folder, into the Assets folder, and select neopulse.psd and click Place. Then click and drag a frame like so to drop in the image. Easy. So now there is an image in our document. If we now come over to the Links panel, we can see the neopulse.psd is present. So once the image is in Illustrator, it's easy to resize and position. With the image selected, if I come to any one of the anchor points, I can click and drag. If I press and hold Shift, then click and drag, you can increase and decrease the image size to scale like so. So I'll just scale up the image until I'm happy, drag it into the middle, I'll move my mouse cursor to the bottom right of the bounding box, then click and drag to rotate the image until it's in line with the axial line and the background image, and that sorts out the product image for the poster. So the next image I want to bring into the poster is the logo. This time, instead of placing a file, I'm going to open a file. So I'll press Command+O on Mac or Control+O on PC to open. I'll navigate to the Media Kit folder provided, into the logo folder, and I'll open bolts logo black.eps. So since we are working in Illustrator and working in vector, it's easy to paste in another vector element to give us the flexibility to change the color later on. With the selection tool, I'll select the vector logo, copy and jump back into my poster. I'll make sure I'm on the image layer and paste, and the logo will now be placed into the dock. I'll come to the far right middle anchor point, press and hold both Alt and Shift, and click and drag inwards to scale the image down like so. And I'll simply place it in the top right corner of the poster. Easy. Step 5. Working with type. So now all my images are placed into the poster design, I can now start working with the type elements. So looking back at my sketch, I want the main heading type on the poster to run perpendicular to the axial line. Here we can see that part of the headline type is on the left and part of the headline is on the right, and some of the supportive type elements run in parallel with the axial line. To start, I'll come over into the Layers panel. With the Images layer selected, I'll click the plus icon at the bottom of the Layers panel to add a new layer, and I'll rename this layer to Type. I'll hit the lock icon on the Images layer as to not select anything on the Images layer. And to begin, I'll start with the headline type. So with the Type layer selected, we can come into the Tools menu, select the Type tool and click once on the poster. Upon click, this will create a type element. Right now, I have a default font applied, but that's okay. I'm not going to worry about that too much right now. So I'll jump back into the poster content doc, and on page 3, we can see the copy options. I'll copy the word footwear from the title option 2, then back into Illustrator, I'll paste it in. And now we have our first bit of type. Now, depending on your default properties, here I'll push the type up to start working with it. And on this occasion, I'll set the font size to 150 points. Or, with it selected, click and drag on the corner pin while holding Shift to scale the type up or down. So with my first piece of type in the poster, I quickly want to change the typeface for this. So at this point, I could use any typeface, but I already have an idea of what I want to work with. In a previous step, I undertook some typeface research where I looked at a range of typefaces I like to use. On the second page of my research, I quite liked the look of this typeface here called Rajdhani. Looking at the scamp drawing, we can see that I need a condensed type in order to fit the type into the left and right space. This is a good example of a condensed typeface that works well in all caps. So a good option if you want to fit a wide word on your poster design across the page. Also, with its subtle round corners, this typeface presents a clean and minimal aesthetic with a softer tone. Coming with 5 distinct weights, this is a versatile and impactful font that would work well in this design direction. Now, this is a Google font and can be acquired for free. You can find the link in the typeface PDF in the class download folder in folder 1, Design Process, in folder 5, Typography. If you open the PDF, you can simply click the font on page 2 and it will take you directly to the link. So back in Illustrator, I'll select the type, and up in the font selector, I'll type in Rajdhani and apply the font. And on this occasion, I'll set the font weight to bold, and in the character panel, I'll set it to all caps. So looking back at the sketch, we can see that for the main headline text, this runs perpendicular to the axial line, and I have also broken this into parts to allow for the typeface to be large, legible and impactful to work around the center image. So working with a layout like this can be a little tricky as it's set to an angle, but we will just have to craft the layout to get it right. So the first thing I'll do is select the type with the selection tool. I'll move the mouse cursor to the bottom right of the bounding box, then click and drag to rotate. And as I rotate, I'll be careful to align the bounding box with the guides like so. Once I have one type element in place and aligned, duplicating and editing will be easy. So I'll select my type element, press and hold Alt and just drag down slightly to quickly duplicate another. Now looking back at my sketch, I can see that to have the full word footwear would be too wide of a word to fit and balance the elements. So my approach is to split the word to fit in the space more comfortably. So back in Illustrator, now I have two type elements with the word footwear. I'll select the first type element, double click and select the last four words and delete. I'll press Escape to deselect the type. I'll select the next type element, double click. I'll select the first four letters and press delete, and press Escape to deselect the type. So now I have these two type elements of the two parts of the word. I can click to select them both and move them around in that space to position them. So I'll just move them up to the top of the canvas, and with them both selected, I can click on the middle right anchor and press and hold Shift and click and drag to scale them both up. So at this point, I can see that the product image in the center of the poster is a little larger than I want. So to help me place my type in the space more comfortably, I'm just going to reduce the product image down slightly. So I'll come over into the layers panel and unlock the images layer. I'll click on the product image, click on the right middle anchor point while holding Shift plus Alt, click and drag in, and this will scale the image down nicely. So I'll select the two type elements above and just move them into position and scale up a little more until I find a place that I'm happy with. Notice for this top type, I'm cropping the word foot just slightly off the top of the canvas area. If I come up to View and hit Trim View, this will remove the visibility of everything in the pasteboard area. And now we can get a good look at the current layout, and we can see where the type has now been cropped. Now I'm doing this to add a little bit more visual dynamic to the poster composition. When all visual elements are kept inside a poster's canvas area, this can feel neat and ordered. However, when we start to crop elements out, it starts to break free of the surrounding frame. And this makes the design feel bigger than it actually is. This can create momentum into or out of a canvas area, which can create movement. This is a very appropriate design quality for this poster, as we want it to feel energetic and free. So for now, I'll just leave my first type element at the top. With the selection tool, I'll click and drag over them both. I'll press and hold Alt on the keyboard and click, drag them down to duplicate two new type elements. I'll just tuck these under the product image, and with them selected, I'll make sure the fill color is selected in the tools menu. I'll come up to swatches and set them to white. Now it's just a simple case of changing these two words. With the selection tool, I'll click on the top word, double click, select all and type in FEAR. I'll press Escape to deselect the type, select the next type element below, double click, select all and type in LESS. I'll press Escape to deselect the type, and with the selection tool, I'll just select the words and rearrange them until I have something that looks like this. So now we need to add in other words to complete the phrase footwear for the fearless. This can easily be done by selecting one of the type layers above. I'll press and hold Alt on the keyboard and drag down to quickly duplicate the type layer. I'll double click into my new type layer, select all and type in FOR. I'll press Escape to deselect the text element. I'll click on one of the corner anchor points, holding Shift and scale down and tuck just under the word wear until I have something like this. With my new type element, I'll press and hold Alt, click and drag down and above the word fear. I'll make sure the fill color is selected in the tools menu, come up to the swatches panel, set this to white. I'll double click into the text, select all and type in THE. So that now completes the headline title. If I come back up to View and hit Trim View, we can see that this bottom bit of text is cropped as well. So now we can see that it feels like the text is flowing in from the top and flowing out from the bottom, creating some interesting movement there throughout the poster with the product image in the center. With the main headline set, we can now look to incorporate the product name into the design. Now in my sketch, I had this quite small over here on the left, but if we look in the final design, I like the idea of having it quite large in the background in line with the axial line set as an outline. I liked how this added a bit more texture to the poster design, so let's now look to bring that in. Again, I'll come up and select one of the larger type elements, press and hold Alt on the keyboard and click and drag down to quickly duplicate. I'll move my mouse cursor down to the bottom right bounding box anchor point, click and drag to rotate, and I'll carefully make sure that the bounding box aligns exactly to the axial line. With my new type element, I'll double click, select all, then type in NEOPULSE and press escape to deselect. So that is my new type element aligned perfectly to the axial line. Next, I want to scale this up and have it running from the bottom left to the top right, cropping in slightly and cropping out slightly. So I'll select the new type layer and drag it down to the left, partially cropping the letter off the canvas area. I'll press and hold shift and click and drag on the right middle anchor point to the right, scaling up the text like so. Now on this occasion, I'd like to reduce the tracking, so with the type layer selected, I'll press and hold Alt on the keyboard and simply tap left on the arrow, and this will bring in the tracking. I'll press left a few times to bring the tracking until I have something that looks like this. Then I'll press and hold shift on the keyboard and again click the right middle anchor and drag out to scale up the word to fit on my canvas. So right now we can see that this new type element is appearing on top of the image. So I'll come into the layers panel, click the type layer and drag it down below the images layer and make sure the lock icon is applied to the images layer. This will now change the hierarchy of the layer structure and allow the image to appear on top. So now things are starting to get a bit busy on my composition. I'll press Command plus colon on Mac or Control plus colon on PC, and this will toggle on and off the guides. And we can start to see things more clearly. So I'm going to click back on the word Neopulse. I'll come to the Tools menu and click the Swap Fill and Stroke Color. This will set my word to a outline stroke. Next, I'll come into the Layers panel and click the lock icon on the base layer. I'll select the background image and I'll just move this down a little. I'll click back on the word Neopulse and just move this down a little to allow for more space for the top words to breathe in the space above. Next, I'm going to add the model number. I'll click on the word Neopulse as it currently has the right orientation. I'll press and hold Alt, click and drag up to quickly duplicate. I'll click on the far right middle anchor point, press and hold Shift, scale down drastically to reduce the size of the font, and just place it in the space above like so. Back into the poster content deck on page 4, I'll come and copy the model number, 245. Back into Illustrator, I'll click to select the new type layer, double click, select all, and paste in the model number. But this time, I'll also type in the word model before the hashtag. Next, I'll come over to the Tools menu, click the Swap and Fill. I'll come up to the Control panel, click down in the Font Family tab and choose Light. I'll press Escape to deselect the text. With the text element still selected, I'll press Alt on the keyboard and tap the right arrow a number of times to increase the tracking until I get around 720 in the character panel. And I'll set my type to 20 points. And that completes the initial type elements in my poster design. Now it's time to bring in smaller type elements and look to complete the poster design. Next, I'm going to place the paragraph text. Now looking back at the sketch, we can see that my initial idea was to place the paragraph text just above the larger text on the right. So this time, I'm going to use a different technique. With the type tool selected, I'll come down and click and drag a type box above the white text on the right. Back into the contents deck on page 3, I'll select the paragraph contents for option 2. Back into Illustrator, I'll paste in the new text. I'll click into the text box and press Command plus A on Mac or Control plus A on PC to select all. I'll change the font size to 19. Make sure the font is set to medium. Be sure to click off all caps. Click on the drop down for the leading in the character panel. I'll select Auto and set the fill color to white. And now I have my paragraph type. So I'll press Escape to deselect the type. With the selection tool, I'll click on the middle right anchor point and just drag it out slightly to alter the ragging of the text like so. Next, I'll need to carefully rotate this paragraph text so it runs in line with the axial line. Now, when rotating paragraph text, you will have to be careful. If we move our mouse cursor down to the right, click and drag as we usually would, this will rotate the frame but not the text inside the frame. In order to rotate the paragraph text, we will need to use a different method. Instead of clicking and dragging on the right corner pin, this time we're going to press R on the keyboard to activate the rotate tool. As I click and rotate, the whole paragraph text and frame will rotate as a whole. So remember, if you want to rotate paragraph text, you will have to press R to activate the rotation tool to click and rotate. So I'll click and drag slowly and make sure that the bounding box aligns perfectly with the axial line. And then click and drag down to align with the white headline text. Now looking back at my sketch, we can see that in the bottom left I have some additional type elements and the web address. So let's get these in. So now I have my paragraph type box. I can just come, select this, press and hold Alt, click and drag and quickly duplicate this down. Back into the contents deck on page 3, I'll select the footer elements content on option 2. Back in Illustrator, I'll paste in the new text. Into the text, I'll select all. In the character panel, I'll hit the all caps button. I'll click the drop down on the font family and set this to bold. I'll press and hold Alt on the keyboard and press down to increase the leading until I see 40 points in the character panel. Also, while holding Alt, I'll tap the right arrow button to increase the tracking until I see 200 in the character panel. I'll press Escape to deselect the text, then select the middle right anchor point on the bounding box and drag out to allow the text to run on each line, and position in the space like so. For the last type element, I'll come and click on the model number, hold Alt, click and drag up to duplicate. I'll come into the copy deck and select the email address, back into Illustrator. I'll double click into my new type element, paste in the web address, select all, come into the character panel, make sure that the all caps is turned off, click into the tracking and set this to 100, set the point size to 15 and set the weight to normal, and I'll move it down. For the last type element, I'll come back and click on Neopulse, click and drag up to duplicate. I'll click on the far right middle anchor point, press and hold Alt and Shift and drag it in drastically to reduce the size of the type element. I'll click and drag it down, double click into the type element, type in out now. Come into the tools menu, click on the stroke color. In the swatches panel, I'll set this to white and tuck this in under the product image. And now we have all the main type elements in the poster composition. Step 6, working with color. So up to this point, we have been working to get all our visual elements into the composition. At this point, everything is now in the poster, but it's important to keep in mind that nothing is final yet. I still have some tweaking to do to get all of this perfect. Now everything is in, we can now start to think about color and finalizing our design. So when it comes to poster design, I typically don't start thinking about color until the overall poster composition is in a good spot. I typically work in black and white, and once everything is in, I can then start sampling colors and applying colors. So for this poster design, I don't have any specific colors planned. However, the product image and the current background texture is suggesting the purple theme. For my first option, I'm going to work with the purple palette. Here I can take some color inspiration from the sneaker image to create a harmonious color theme. A cool technique we can use in Illustrator is to generate a color theme from an image. To do this is simple. So first I'll come up to View and click off Trim View so we can see the pasteboard. And I'm going to click on the image of the sneakers, press and hold Alt and click up to make a quick duplicate. With the new image selected, I'll come up to Window, scroll down to Image Trace and click to activate the panel. With the panel visible, I'll click the drop down on Preset and select 6 colors. And then Illustrator will then process the image. Once it's done, come up to the control panel and click Expand. Illustrator will process the image and turn it into vector graphics, splitting the image into various vector parts with colors you can select. Now here comes the cool part. With all the parts selected, come into the swatches panel, click the top right menu, click New Color Group. I'll name this Neopulse Swatch, click OK, and now in the swatches panel we can see a new folder with a new color group inside. So this is now a perfect start for us to use color. So I'll come back to View, click Trim View, and I can now start applying some colors. So with the selection tool, I'll first click on the 2 large blocks at the top, footwear. I'll make sure that the fill color is selected in the tools menu. Then I'll come across and select the purple in my new color palette. Now a useful technique to consider here is once a color is applied, come into the swatches panel and double click on the new color swatch. Upon click, up will pop a menu. Now I'm going to come and click the global box and click OK. With my top 2 type elements still selected, I'll just double check that the new global color swatch is applied. Then I'll select the Neopulse text in the background. In the tools menu, I'll make sure that the stroke is selected and I'll come back into the swatches panel and select the purple global color swatch. So by setting that purple swatch to global and applying it to various elements in our composition, if for whatever reason we want to change the color, I can come and click on the global swatch and tweak it. For example, add a little more red. With the preview box at the bottom selected, as I tweak the color, we can see any elements in the poster design with that swatch applied will start to change. And if I click OK, any element in the composition with that color applied will be changed. Easy. So that's the color applied to my text. For this poster design, I'm going to leave the logo set to black. So the last thing I'm going to do is address the background image. Right now, the background image is pretty vibrant and bright with white text set on top. The text could be a little bit more legible, however. So now I'm going to tweak the background image to add a slight darker tint to allow the white text to be more legible on top. To do this, I'll come up to the links panel. I'll click on the Gel Redux PNG, and at the bottom of the links panel, I'll click the Edit in Photoshop button, and this will open in Photoshop. Now, I want to do two things here. I want to simplify the image by applying a monochrome effect and add an overall darker tint to the image. So I'll press Command plus Shift plus N on Mac or Control plus Shift plus N on PC to create a new layer. I'll come to the Tools menu, click on the Fill Color, and type in the following hex value, 562A91. With the Paint Bucket tool, I'll click to fill the layer. Then I'll come up and click on the drop down on the blending mode and click color. Again, I'll press Command Shift plus N on Mac or Control plus Shift plus N on PC to create a new layer. This time in the foreground color, I'll set this to a full black color, and with the Paint Bucket tool, I'll click to fill the layer in black. And I'll set the transparency of this layer to 40%, come up to File and click Save As. I'll navigate to the project folder, into the concept and design folder, into the design folder, into the assets folder, and save as Gel Redux Dark.psd. Back into Illustrator, I'll come over to the links panel, click on Gel Redux.png, come up and click on the top right menu and click Relink. I'll navigate to the project folder, into the concept and design folder, into the design folder, into the assets folder, select Gel Redux Dark.psd and click Place. This will now replace that lighter texture with our new darker texture, and the text is now more clear. Now, one last thing to note, when working with poster designs with images inside, we can also look to enhance these. So in the links panel, I'll select the Neopulse image, then click the Edit Original button at the bottom of the links panel, and it will open in Photoshop. I'll come down and add a level adjustment layer, pull in the right handle and adjust the middle hand slightly just to punch out the colors slightly. So here is the before and after. I'll press Command plus W on Mac or Control plus W on PC to close and save. Then back in Illustrator, it will say, would I like to modify the image? I'll hit yes, and then that will update the image and add more punch. Okay, so if you've been following along up until now, well done. We have covered a lot of ground here, and this is starting to come together nicely. So now everything is in the poster design and we have the colors applied. We can now take the last steps, which is to refine the composition. Up to this point, we have been focusing on getting all the elements into the poster and applying color. Now we are going to finalize the design by focusing on the details to make sure everything is in place. What we want to do here is scrutinize the typography and the positioning of all the elements to make sure it's well balanced and it's all neat. Step 7, refine composition. So I'll come up to View, click on Trim View so I can see my pasteboard. So the first thing I'll address is the larger type elements. First, I want to make sure that they are all comfortable and well placed in the composition, and then arrange all the smaller elements around them. So here I might start by just bringing the background image down a little. This will allow me to better position the web address and the product name in the middle. Next, I'll just tweak the text at the top to make sure it's comfortable in the top space. I'll make sure that the product image is the right size in the middle. I'll make sure that the white text in the bottom section is placed neatly in the space. I'll align the footer elements in the space. I'll make sure the paragraph text is positioned nicely and also ensure the ragging of the text looks neat and tidy. I'll make sure the Out Now type is placed correctly and make sure all the space around the type elements is consistent. After some tweaking, I'll have my first poster design sorted. So right now, I'm happy with this, and I think this does justice to my original scamp design. But do we want to leave it there? Generally, when I do any design, sometimes I have other ideas as I go through the artwork process. One thing I like to do when designing posters is to look at other options, should there be a better solution out there. Looking back at my original poster document, we can see that I have 5 additional designs here. After creating my first design and exploring other options, you can see that using the Axial grid, I have crafted some alternative versions. Here I have some versions with the axial grid in an opposite direction, and I also have an axial grid vertically. In each example, you can see where I have managed to type elements in different ways to create different visual dynamics. Also, I have used the product image in a variety of ways, cropping in the poster to create a variety of visual dynamics. So once I have one layout design in a good place, with my type and image elements, it can be easy to quickly generate other layout variations in Illustrator. Now, I won't go as far as to create every example here, as this would take quite a while. But what I will do here is demonstrate how I can take my initial design and quickly change that into an alternative design. So let's quickly look at how we can do this. Step 8, create variations. So first, let's look to duplicate the design, and this can be done easily. First, I'll make sure that all the layers are unlocked, and up in view, I'll come down to guides and make sure that guides is unblocked. Then in the tools menu, click on the artboard tool, click on the canvas area, press and hold Alt and drag to the right, and upon release, you will create a new artboard, effectively duplicating the poster design. Easy. So with the second poster in place, we can now make some modifications. Now for this second design, I'm going to look to create this example here, where the axial grid is in the opposite direction and where the type is more prominent through the middle, aligned from the bottom left to the top right. So the axial grid on this page is going to be different from the first version. The first grid goes diagonally up from the bottom left to the top right. In this new poster, I'm going to need it to go diagonally from the top left to the bottom right. So first I'll come into the layers panel and I'll click the lock icon on the grid layer. Then I'll click and drag over everything in the composition to select all and simply press delete. Next, I'll come up to the grid layer, uncheck the lock icon, click and drag over my grid, and this should select the guide. I'll come up to Object, Transform, and hit Reflect. I'll be sure to click the vertical box and click OK, and this will flip the guide. Then I'll come back into the layers panel and click the lock icon on the grid layer. And now I'm set up to start adding the visual elements to this poster. And I'm going to start with the background image. So I'll come into the first poster design. I'll be careful to click on the background image. With it selected, I'll press and hold Alt, then click and drag to the right, and this will create a quick duplicate. And I'll place this over onto my canvas area. I'll come up to Object, Transform, and hit Reflect, again making sure to click the vertical checkbox, click OK, and this will flip the image, and I'll place it into position like so. Next, we'll place in the headline type. So first, come back into the layers panel and hit the lock icon on the grid layer to not accidentally select and make any changes. I'll come into the first design with the selection tool. I'll click the first word, foot. I'll press and hold Alt on the keyboard and drag over to the right. This time, I'll place my mouse cursor towards the bottom right corner of the bounding box. Then I'll click and drag while holding Shift, and this will snap rotate in increments of 4. And I'll do this until it snaps into the exact angle I'm looking for. Then I'll just place it against my axial line like so. I'll press and hold Alt, click and drag the word across to create a duplicate, position like so, double click into the word and type in WEAR. With the selection tool, I'll click back on the first word, make sure the foreground color is selected in the tools menu and change the color to white. So now I have one word on the left side of the axial line and one word on the right. On the left, the word is in white, and on the right, the word is in purple. This creates high contrast and an interesting dynamic across the axial line and the background image. Next, I'll select the first word, press and hold Shift, select the second word, and while holding Shift, I can just scale them both up together to find a really interesting position across the middle of my poster design. So using the same technique, I'm going to duplicate the header elements from the first design across into the next design, rotating and scaling down as required, and also changing the color and weight of the type. Soon I'll have my main headline type elements composed like so. Next, I'll duplicate the paragraph and footer elements across, and in this instance, I'll keep them at the same angle, but just place them neatly into the composition towards the bottom. Next, I'll duplicate the logo image across and place into the same position. Then finally, I'll click on the product image and duplicate this across, but this time, instead of placing this in the middle as the primary hook, for my second version, my idea is to have the typography in the middle as the primary hook, and have the product image support around the top and bottom. Here I'll scale down the product image and place it at the top in line with the type, and I'll duplicate another image and place it towards the bottom like so. For these images, instead of scaling them down super small to fit inside the poster area, I'll keep them at a proportionate size, but have them cropped in from the top and the side. If we come up to view and hit trim view, we can see this cropped approach creates a very dynamic visual effect. So here we have two poster designs with two different approaches. In the first design, I'm drawing prominence to the middle of the poster where the text is emitting outwards from the product image, the primary hook. And in the second version, it's the headline typography, which is the main focal point, the primary hook, where the product image plays more of a supportive role around. This is just one of many different versions I created from my original poster design, and with more time I could create dozens more. So when it comes to poster design, once you have set up one poster composition, it can be easy and swift to make variations and explore other options. Now you don't have to do this, however I find this is a good approach and work ethic. This ensures that I keep pushing my design to see if any other options may work better. Now before we finish this tutorial, there is one last thing we will need to do, and that is to export our poster ready for print. Step 9, exporting. So once you're happy with your artwork and you want to export ready for print, you can either export the entire document or you can export just one poster or a range. For this example, I just want to export the second poster here. So when you're ready to export, simply come up to File and click on Save as Copy. So here I'll navigate to the project folder and select the PDFs folder. I'll name the file Neopulse Poster, and down in the format I'll choose Adobe PDF. Now you can export all, but on this occasion I'll click on Range and type in 2. I'll click Save and up will pop another menu. So here I'm going to make sure that for Adobe PDF preset, high quality print is selected. I'll make sure that View PDF after saving is checked. I'll come over to the left and click Marks and Bleeds and click only on Trim Marks. For bleed, I'll set this to use document bleed settings and click Save PDF. Then Illustrator will do its thing and up will pop Acrobat Reader. I'll come up to View, Zoom, Fit to Height, and now I can see the poster design exported as a PDF ready to send to a printer. If you notice around the outside, we can also see the trim marks, and this is where the printer will trim the poster after printing to ensure a clean cut with no white edges. Perfect. So that's how you can go from a really rough sketch on a page to drafting a more accurate scamp, to artworking a dynamic axial grid typographic poster in Illustrator, and managing the elements to create variations within the same document and export ready for print. So now you have seen how to set up and create a poster design in Illustrator. Your 12th task is to create a poster from your own design. If you have been following along and have sketched out some of your own designs, take some time to develop your own poster design. Be sure to refer to the task list PDF in the class download folder for more instructions for this task. Also, feel free to try a completely different design approach using different colors and assets from the media kit. Now try and spend around an hour or two on this exercise. And if you do create your own designs, be sure to share them in the project section below so we can all see your designs. We would all love to see what you can come up with. So this is one of many posters I have created in Adobe Illustrator. If you want to save yourself some time and use these poster design templates, you can get them as part of the poster design ebook. The poster design ebook includes crucial design theory to help you create professional poster design with lots of design resources, more tutorials, and includes all the poster design tutorial assets. If you want to learn more, you can check the link in the description. Well, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell button to be notified of more tutorial videos like this in future. This tutorial was created for all my members of the GDS Design School community. If you'd like to join the GDS Design School community, where we chat about design, give each other feedback, and where I set design challenges, you're all welcome to join for free. Again, the link is in the description, and I look forward to seeing you there. So until my next design tutorial, unleash your creativity, and I'll see you next time.